The front gates of the Hawthorne estate were as intimidating as the man who owned it. No nanny lasted more than a day inside. 3 fiery 6-year-olds, identical in face, polar opposites in chaos, had sent trained childcare professionals running for the hills. But today, Claire Thompson wasn't here for an easy job. The single mom's rent was overdue, her pantry almost bare. She had walked 3 miles just to get to this interview after her car broke down. "If I can handle my own little hurricane at home," she muttered under her breath, "I can handle 3. Inside, the scene was worse than she imagined. Lego bricks littered the grand foyer like landmines. One boy was scaling the marble banister, another was painting the wall with chocolate pudding, and a third was trying to train a very frightened Pomeranian. From the second-floor balcony, Alexander Hawthorne, billionaire CEO, widower, and father, watched with folded arms, waiting for her to bolt like all the others. But Claire didn't flinch. Instead, she knelt to the boy's eye level. "Looks like you've got a lot of energy," she said softly. "How about you show me your best race outside before that pudding dries?" 3 pairs of curious eyes met hers. And for the first time in months, the triplets didn't scream, fight, or hide. They just followed her. Alexander's brow furrowed. Who was this woman who could turn chaos into quiet with nothing more than kindness? Claire smiled. She wasn't here to tame them. She was here to love them. Alexander Hawthorne wasn't a man easily impressed. He had built his empire on discipline and control, 2 things his children seemed allergic to. Watching Claire coax them outside, he followed quietly, arms still crossed. The backyard was a child's dream. Rolling lawns, a treehouse, and a pool that glistened in the sun. Claire knelt in the grass, holding 3 spoons and a bowl of grapes. "We're going to race," she announced, "but we have to work together. The only way to win is if all of you cross the finish line together." The triplets blinked, intrigued. For months they had been competing against each other, craving attention. No one had ever made them a team. Within minutes, laughter echoed across the estate. Alexander caught himself smiling, until one of the boys tripped, scattering grapes everywhere. Normally, this would spark tears and a tantrum. But instead, the other 2 stopped, knelt, and helped their brother up. Claire clapped her hands. Now, that is how a team wins. Alexander's eyes narrowed. This wasn't luck. She understood them. By lunchtime, the house was quieter than it had been in years. The triplets sat at the table, munching sandwiches, their eyes glued to Claire as she told a silly story about her own son, Jake, who once wore a superhero cape to school and refused to take it off for a week. Something in her voice, soft but strong, stirred something in Alexander. This wasn't just about her patience. This woman had lived struggle. She understood loneliness. And for the first time in years, he felt the faintest flicker of hope. But he had no idea that by the end of the week, she wouldn't just change his children, she'd change him. For the next 2 days, Claire became a quiet force in the Hawthorne household. She didn't shout when the boys argued. She didn't bribe them with candy or threaten punishment. Instead, she taught them how to bake cookies, build pillow forts, and, most shockingly, say please and thank you without being reminded. Alexander watched from the shadows of doorways, his sharp eyes noting every detail. He wasn't just observing her with the boys. He was trying to figure her out. Why would a woman this patient, this capable, take on such a job for the pittance he was offering? On the 3rd night, after the boys had gone to bed, he finally asked, "You're overqualified for this," he said, leaning against the kitchen counter. "You could get paid more anywhere else." Claire rinsed the last dish and set it in the rack. "Maybe," she replied, "but money doesn't keep a child from feeling alone." She glanced at him, her eyes steady. "And I know what loneliness feels like." Alexander didn't respond. He had lost his wife 4 years ago. Since then, every nanny had been a temporary fix, never a connection. He had told himself his heart was too guarded for anything more. But that night, he found himself lingering at the top of the stairs, listening to her hum a lullaby to his youngest, one he recognized. His late wife used to sing it. The memory hit him hard, and for the first time in years, the cold walls he had built around himself began to crack. The morning of the 4th day began like any other. Pancakes on the table, triplets chattering about their planned pirate treasure hunt. But by noon, dark clouds rolled over the estate, and the air thickened with the promise of rain. Alexander was in his study, on a tense conference call, when a crash of thunder shook the windows. Moments later, Claire appeared in the doorway, pale. "It's Evan," she said quickly. "He's not breathing right." In an instant, Alexander was on his feet. They found the youngest triplet curled on the couch, clutching his chest, his breath short and shallow. Claire had already called 911. The minutes before the ambulance arrived felt like hours. Claire knelt beside Evan, speaking softly, keeping him calm, while Alexander paced, his jaw tight with helplessness. When the paramedics finally arrived, Evan was rushed out into the storm. Without hesitation, Claire climbed into the ambulance. Alexander froze for half a second. He had always handled crises alone, never letting anyone see his fear. But this time he followed. At the hospital, tests confirmed an asthma attack. Evan would be fine, but the doctor said if Claire hadn't acted so quickly, the outcome could have been far worse. When Evan was settled and sleeping, Alexander stepped into the hallway, finding Claire sitting on a hard plastic chair, her hair damp from the rain. "You stayed," he said quietly, almost in disbelief. She met his gaze without hesitation. "They're not just your children anymore," she said. "They're mine too, at least for as long as you'll let me be here." Something in his chest shifted, and for the first time in years, he realized he wasn't afraid of letting someone in. Evan was discharged the next morning, and the ride back to the estate was quiet. The triplets clung to Claire's hands like they'd never let go. Alexander drove, his eyes flicking to the rearview mirror more often than the road. That night, after the boys were asleep, he found Claire in the kitchen, packing a small lunchbox. "Long day tomorrow?" he asked. She froze, then smiled faintly. "It's for my son, Jake. He's staying with a neighbor while I work here." Alexander leaned against the counter. "You've never mentioned him before." Claire hesitated. "Jake's 9. Bright, funny, tougher than he should have to be. His dad left before he was born. I've been working 2 jobs to keep us afloat, but sometimes I still have to choose between paying rent and buying groceries." Her voice wavered. "When I came here, it wasn't just for a job. I needed hope that good people and good moments still existed." Alexander was silent for a long time. He thought about the night she'd stayed at the hospital, the way she had soothed his sons without hesitation. She had given them stability and warmth in less than a week. "You should bring him here," Alexander said finally. "Tomorrow." Her eyes widened. I couldn't. You can. My boys already see you as family. Maybe it's time I do too." Claire's throat tightened. She had walked into this mansion expecting nothing more than a paycheck. She hadn't expected a place where her heart and her son might finally belong. The next morning, Claire arrived with Jake in tow, a shy boy with sandy hair and eyes that flicked nervously around the towering Hawthorne estate. The triplets stared for all of 3 seconds before shoving toy swords into his hands. "You're on our team," they shouted, dragging him toward the backyard. By lunchtime, Jake was laughing so hard his cheeks hurt. Alexander watched from the patio, a strange warmth settling in his chest. This was what his home had been missing. Not just order, but joy. That evening, after the children were asleep, Alexander found Claire in the living room, picking up stray Lego bricks. He hesitated only a moment before speaking. "I've been thinking," he began. "The boys need you. Jake needs you. And so do I." He met her eyes. "I want you here permanently. Not as an employee, but as part of this family. You'll have a home, a future, and no reason to ever worry about rent again." Tears filled Claire's eyes. "Alexander, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he said simply. She nodded, unable to speak, her heart swelling with a mix of relief and gratitude. Months later, the house rang with the sound of 5 children, 3 triplets, and 1 little boy who no longer felt like an outsider. Alexander, once a man locked behind grief, now laughed freely, often joining their games. And Claire? She had come seeking nothing more than a paycheck. But she had found a place where love was louder than loss, and kindness could knit broken hearts back together. Sometimes, The family you need isn't the one you're born with. It's the one that opens its door when you knock.